What's going on, party people? Welcome to another episode of Culture 316. I'm one of your hosts and producers, Jordan Ahisi, and I'm joined by nobody today. I will be doing a solo version today. Unfortunately, we had some complications behind the scenes. God willing, Mo will be back next week. But thank you guys so much for tuning into the pod. Uh, if you joined our space, well, first off, let me start off with if you guys like what you're seeing, if you want to continue to support, and we're really, really appreciative of your support, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Be sure to rate the show 5 stars. This is how we get more popular. This is how we reach more people. And we really, really appreciate the continuous support that you guys extend to us. That's the first order of business. Second order of business, this past week we had Money in the Bank. And with every show, we have a space, the 316 space on Twitter, where it's kind of like an online means of curating community. And we're just really, really grateful for the continuous support and you guys always popping out. It's always a fun time. It's always a blast. And we're just super duper appreciative. This past week was no different because Money in the Bank was a blast of a show. But just wanted to kind of extend my gratitude to everyone who came out to the 316 space this past Money in the Bank. However, we're not gonna waste any more time. We're gonna get right into it because speaking of Money in the Bank emanated this past week from London. I believe it was this past Saturday, and it was great. WWE released a press release essentially saying that this year's Money in the Bank was the highest viewed, highest grossing Money in the Bank of all time. And for the right reasons. There was so much happening. There was so much going on. And I could go into a little bit of detail of a little bit of my takeaways from the show, my highlights of the show. First things first, man, the Bloodline Civil War tag team match, easily one of the most anticipated tag team matches in the history of WWE, and there were no tag team championships on the line, which should tell you the enormity of this story and how well developed and how well played out it's been. Obviously, Jay Uso getting the pin was phenomenal. It was a full circle moment. When my guy Omar brought it up to me. He said that Jay Uso was actually the first person to pin Roman Reigns on the main roster when he was a part of the Shield. And obviously, with his 3.5 year run of not being pinned or submitted, the fact that Jay was able to kind of pick up the win was just poetic justice. It came full circle, and there were little callbacks to matches that they had in the past. For example, a couple years ago when Jay and Roman were going head to head, there was a point in time where Jay went for the pin and Roman to kick out of the pin, low blow Jay. And, the referee didn't see it. And this same spot was done this year, this time around. But this time it was Jay who was doing the low blow. And it was just a phenomenal callback. It was a phenomenal match. The cracks continue to develop, and now with a segment that's going to be on SmackDown tonight, with the court, the tribal court, with the tribal chief as well as the Usos. I can only imagine what's going to happen next. I'm very, very excited to see where Roman Reigns' character development goes. So that was the first thing. The second thing that I loved about Money in the Bank was the women's Money in the Bank ladder match. I think that it was really, 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 really well done. I think that was one of the best finishes I've seen from a ladder match and from a Money in the Bank ladder match I've ever seen, with Io kind of handcuffing Becky and Bailey together, literally climbing on top of Bailey's shoulders to get the Money in the Bank briefcase. I predicted that Io Sky would be the Mrs. Money in the Bank. And I honestly think that it's the best choice because there's already tensions between Bailey and Io Sky, right? And with that tension, with that pre-existing tension, you already have a story kind of in place. One of the things that I took away from the Money in the Bank uh, recipients, usually the best Money in the Bank recipients are the ones that are kind of groomed into being main event players after they win the contract, and the kind of the story that kind of serves as buffer between when they win the contract and when they get the championship. Um, I think the prime example of this is Edge. I think that when Edge won the Money in the Bank contract, the first Money in the Bank contract at WrestleMania 21, he was already seen as someone who can potentially be in the main event. However, the story between when he won that contract and that championship reign was when he went up against Matt Hardy, right? And the Matt Hardy Edge Lita kind of love saga was kind of the thing that kind of elevated him into main event status before he even captured the title. And I believe that what Matt Hardy and the Matt Hardy Edge and Lita story did for Edge's career is the same thing that a Bailey Io Sky storyline can do for Io's career. Bailey obviously is one of the most active four horsewomen in the WWE today. Obviously, in my opinion, one of the most iconic women's wrestlers of all time, a first ballot Hall of Famer, an absolute stacked resume. And I think that the fact that this story is can potentially happen, I think is very, very satisfying. I think it's super duper dope. Um, I love how there were so many kind of stories that were going into this Money in the Bank ladder match, the women's Money in the Bank ladder match, and that all of it played a role. Obviously, the Becky Trish, Zoe Stark kind of dynamic played a role in that match. Obviously, Becky and Bailey, who have had a lot of history, played a role in that match. Obviously, Bailey and Io, even down to when Io got pushed off a ladder initially by Bailey. I think that a lot of people just assume that, oh my God, Bailey's gonna win. So to kind of see all these dynamics kind of come to a head, I think was really, really dope. So I thought that that was a beautiful, beautiful match. I really, 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 really liked it, and I think that the right person won. On to the men's Money in the Bank ladder match because I think that it upset a lot of people. Because obviously over the past 2 to 3 weeks, the WWE superstar that has been grabbing everyone's attention easily has been LA Knight. I don't know what happened. He's always been an immensely talented professional wrestler in the ring, on the mic. But over the past month, he's just been gaining speed and momentum like never before, right? And I think that a lot of people saw him going into this match and was like, oh, he's for sure going to win it. And then when he didn't win it, there was a lot of disappointment. However, I actually first of all, I believe that Damian Priest deserved it just as much as LA Knight. Damian Priest has been putting in work over the past couple of years, especially when he joined the Judgment Day. I feel like his overall work has just been astounding. Obviously, the work that he's done with Bad Bunny has been incredible, and I believe that him being a part of the Judgment Day has helped him develop his character to the point where I don't think that he needs the Judgment Day anymore. And I think that him capturing that Money in the Bank briefcase kind of gives him flexibility, if you will, right? He can obviously cash in and stay in the Judgment Day and potentially be kind of like a leader of the Judgment Day. He could cash in and feud with Finn, and the Judgment Day can kind of split. There's so many ways that you can kind of go about this. And I feel like him capturing the Money in the Bank briefcase, I think was a great move because it allowed for so much flexibility and interest and nuance, even down to the dynamic between him and Finn Balor, right? Because obviously during that Seth versus Finn match, we saw Damian come out. It looked like he was about to cash in, and then next thing you know, he just kind of stood there. You know what I mean? And he, arguably cost Finn the match. And then on Monday night, we see Finn kind of, jumping in. He didn't come out with the rest of the Judgment Day at the beginning of the show, but then he came out when it was time for kind of Damien to get his lick and when he could have potentially cashed in. And you kind of saw that back and forth dynamic between Finn and Damien. So this is going to make for a very, very interesting dynamic and a very, very interesting story. I feel like LA Knight, I would have loved to see him win the Money in the Bank briefcase, but I feel like there's another opportunity for him in the near future. Obviously, there's Survivor Series, is the Royal Rumble, and I have a pitch, but I'm gonna wait until later to talk about it because it's gonna tie into another topic in the show. Um, I'm trying to think of anything else. Cody versus Dominic. It wasn't a squash, but I think that it was a good kind of a solid Cody win. Um, yeah, a solid Cody win, and I think that it kind of served as a good premise for him to approach Seth the following night. on Raw, which led to Brock Lesnar returning, and now that kind of sets up Brock and Cody to have you know the rubber match potentially at another big show like SummerSlam. So I thought that was a nice little entertaining little diddly that they did there. But I think that was the biggest thing pertaining. These were the biggest things pertaining to kind of Money in the Bank. Obviously, the London crowd and the London crowd for Money in the Bank was absolutely electric. It was fantastic. Like if I feel like if you are acclimated to pro wrestling, especially in London, and you've been watching shows like the NXT UK shows, you already know that the UK is going to bring it. But I like it was just so good. Like that crowd is so hot, and it led to a very, very, in my opinion, a very, very interesting and iconic moment. I'm going to segue into the next topic because during the Money in the Bank show, right in between matches, we got a surprise appearance from the 16-time world champion John Cena. Right, he comes out, everybody's shocked. He has this segment with Grayson Waller, who I love Grayson Waller, but he essentially gets on the mic and he says, "I'm here on behalf of y'all because I think that it's time that we bring WrestleMania to London." And the crowd goes berserk. They go absolutely nuts, and rightfully so. I don't think that we have had a London WrestleMania ever. If I'm not, I believe that we had a SummerSlam in London, but I don't think that we've had obviously, yeah, we've had a SummerSlam in London, but we have not had a WrestleMania in London. Obviously, AEW plans on doing All Out. I think it's All In or All Out in London at Wembley Stadium, and they're well on their way to a sellout. So clearly, there's a market for a WrestleMania type of show to be in London. But I think that the biggest question was should WWE embark on this? And one of the members of the Parliament, Alex Davies Jones, had something very, very interesting to say about the possibility of WrestleMania coming to the UK. She says WrestleMania in the UK would be phenomenal for our economy and standing on a global stage, but most importantly for UK fans of all ages. The APPG have already been talking about how we can help to make that happen. So the fans are all in. The government in the UK is all in. That the play on words, it couldn't be more ironic. But everybody's all in on this idea of London being a host city of WrestleMania. And I think that it should happen. I think that it is about time. I think that these international premium live events have kind of served as a reason as to why WWE needs to be bringing more of their bigger shows overseas. Because we saw what happened at Clash at the Castle, right? And this wasn't even considered a big four, and it felt like a big four. So imagine what they would be able to do to WrestleMania. And also, I feel like a lot of UK fans and a lot of international fans have like been doing their due diligence over the past 40 years, right? Essentially, now that WrestleMania is going to Philly, is about to be WrestleMania 40. UK fans have been doing their due diligence over the past 40 years, going to different American cities, right? Going to Houston, going to Dallas, going to Orlando, New York, going to Philly, Atlanta, Los Angeles. They've been doing their due diligence and coming out here. I feel like it's time for American fans to go out there. And I feel like a WrestleMania in the UK would be absolutely fantastic. I think that it's absolutely a phenomenal idea and it needs to happen. But that's just my take on it. I want to know what you guys feel about it. Should WrestleMania be in the United Kingdom? And if so, when? Let us know in the comments below. But we're going to be moving on. So, uh, speaking of oh Jesus, that was a fly. Speaking of the WWE, it has come to my attention. I've seen it on social media that one Austin Theory has now reached 200 days, 200 plus days as the United States champion. And it was brought to my attention like, how has his reign been? I don't think it's been good. And the funny part about it is that usually heels are the people that give the championship prestige, right? But it's been lacking. It's very I don't see the US title having that pop factor. And it sucks because when you look at the other brand and you look at their quote unquote mid-card title, Gunter is having a once in a lifetime, once in a generation run with that Intercontinental Championship. I think that after Vince McMahon stepped down from being the CEO and kind of the head creative in charge, we noticed that Triple H was putting a bigger emphasis on these quote unquote mid card titles, right? And I think that he did a good job at making them feel important. But when Austin Theory holds that championship, it doesn't feel important anymore. You know what I mean? And I think that it has nothing to do with who he is as a wrestler. I've been following Austin Theory since he's been in Evolve. He's always been great in the ring. He has a great look. I feel like he can even speak on the mic, but I feel like, Cena kind of said it best. We don't know who Austin Theory is. Like, I don't believe Austin Theory when he talks. And I feel like one of the things that we have to figure out, or that he has to figure out, is who is Austin Theory? Who is this modern version of Austin Theory, and how can that translate into the WWE audience? I think that Triple H even tried to kind of like give him some grit, made him grow out his facial hair. He started dressing a little bit more rugged, but it still hasn't had that pop factor. And so I don't think that he's really had any memorable segments, memorable matches, memorable moments. And if they are, it was really stuff that had nothing to do with him, right? Like the most memorable things that he was involved in were the things pertaining to John Cena. And it was because John Cena was being John Cena, right? It wasn't because Austin Theory was like, standing 10 toes. It was because John Cena was being John Cena, right? So there's that. But this is what I wanted to bring up from earlier. I have an idea. I think that LA Knight should be the next United States champion. I believe that LA Knight is one of the most over acts in WWE. I believe that it's Rhea. I believe that it's Dominic. I believe that it's Seth and Roman. And then this isn't in no particular order, by the way. I think it's Roman, Seth, Dominic, Rhea, and LA Knight. I think those are the most popular acts in WWE at the moment. And I feel like they need to capitalize off of LA Knight's momentum. And I feel like they need to have him win the United States Championship potentially at SummerSlam. I believe that he is a very believable United States champion. I believe that people would gravitate towards him. I think that the prestige of it would go up because he's holding it. I also think it's just his time to hold some gold. And if he's not going to win the Money in the Bank ladder match, which is fine, right? If he's not going to win the Money in the Bank ladder match, he should at least be the United States champion. Especially, I feel like he would be a good foil. I would say like good foil, or like a good kind of like other end of the spectrum to kind of contrast what Gunter is doing with the Intercontinental Championship. But I want to know what y'all think. How do you believe that Austin Theory's reign as the United States champion has been? And should LA Knight be the next US champ? But we're going to be moving right along. Boop, 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 boop. So, speaking of LA Knight, this is the perfect ripoff. I mean, perfect ripoff, perfect segue. On a recent podcast, Kevin Nash said that LA Knight is a complete ripoff of The Rock. He was kind of citing his recent promos. And the big question that came up was, is LA Knight a ripoff of The Rock? My immediate answer is no. I believe that just like any good artist, you are the sum total of your influences, right? Whoever you consume the most is the people that you're going to reflect. I believe that there is some Rock esque things about him, but I also see a little bit of Stone Cold. I also see a little bit of Ric Flair. I believe that the reason why they think that it's like a Rock LA Knight thing is because he's a very, very confident talker. Obviously, he is very, very bold. He uses words like Kavorka, which is, it's something that The Rock would say, and I can see where there is a little bit of a comparison, if you will, as far as like he's being The Rock, but I don't think that he's being The Rock. I think that he's the sum total of his influences. And if you watch pro wrestling, you can see a little bit of a lot of the greats in him. I think that The Rock is in him. I think Stone Cold is in him a little bit. Mm. Sorry, I think you see a little bit of Stone Cold in him. I think that you see a little bit of Ric Flair in him. And on top of that, I also feel like if we're going to sit here and say, well, LA Knight is a complete ripoff of The Rock, like we also have to talk about Terry ripping off Billy Graham. Because Terry kind of took Billy Graham's whole thing, but nobody says that. I just feel like just like LA Knight was influenced by The Rock, I feel like Terry was influenced by Billy Graham, but I don't think that it's a complete ripoff. I see things from The Rock that are in him, but that's just being a student of the game. Just like I see a lot of Ric Flair in MJF. I see a lot of Ric Flair mannerisms in MJF. I see a little bit of Miz in MJF. Like, it's just natural. If you consume this, I see a lot of Roddy Piper in CM Punk, and I see a little bit of CM Punk in Adam Cole. I feel like if you study the game and if you study pro wrestling, just like any artist, any singer, any rapper who studies people that are at the top of their game, you're going to see things that were in the greats in those people. And so I don't think that LA Knight is ripping off The Rock, but I do believe that we are seeing a little bit of The Rock in LA Knight. And to be honest, I don't mind. I feel like there are things in The Rock that translate to now. And I think that's part of the reason what makes him great and what makes him stand out, because he's a bold, larger than life character, just like The Rock is. Now, if he's going to have the same resume or impact, we'll see. But I want to know, do you believe that LA Knight is ripping off The Rock? Let us know in the comments below. But we're going to move right along. All right, so boom. I don't know if anybody is watching NXT, which I still stand on as being one of the most underwatched and underrated promotions. But they brought back NXT Underground, right? Which I love. I love the fact that NXT brought back NXT Underground. We're going to be talking about Gable Stevenson this segment, but I kind of want to touch a little bit about NXT Underground just for a bit, just for a bit. Um, NXT Underground, I think, is perfect. I think that when the Underground concept was on Raw, it was kind of weird and startling because the Underground brand, I guess you can say, was not synonymous with Raw. It didn't feel Raw-esque because Raw is such a polished PG product, at least now, that Underground kind of felt a little bit out of place. And the talent there just wasn't, I don't think that it was, what it is in NXT. And I feel like NXT adapting that underground kind of format and style, I think it works because NXT has a little bit of grit to it, right? Like I feel like this is a great comparison. If WWE was the city of New York, Raw would be Manhattan, right? Raw would be Manhattan, SmackDown would be Queens, and I feel like NXT would be Brooklyn. And I feel like the thing that makes Brooklyn Brooklyn is the fact that it's just chock full of authenticity and grit. And I feel like that underground concept kind of fits that mold and fits that brand. So I think that them adopting that underground standpoint and kind of position is absolutely perfect. And I'm so glad that they're implementing it. But I wanted to particularly talk about seeing Gable Stevenson on there. Gable Stevenson made an appearance on NXT Underground. Obviously, we talked about him on the show 3-4 weeks back. He has decided to opt into his last year of eligibility in the NCAA. I think it's because he probably wants to go after another national championship, potentially graduate. But he still has his NIL deal with the WWE. I don't believe that he is able to compete with the WWE just yet. I don't think he's allowed to have a match. But in this particular segment, we saw Gable Stevenson bring NXT Underground to Suplex City, and it was amazing. His German suplexes were so clean. Like it was some of the cleanest German suplexes I've ever seen, and they were on big guys, which I think shows you how strong he is or how strong they want to make him look. But I think this was absolutely perfect. Obviously, if you have a guy like Gable Stevenson, who once again is opting into his fourth year of eligibility for the NCAA, who cannot compete, and you want to integrate him into the product, this is a good way to integrate him into the product without him necessarily competing, right? So it doesn't go against his NCAA responsibilities. It doesn't go against those rules and regulations. But it's a good way to begin integrating him into the product. It's a good way to get the WWE audience familiar with Gable Stevenson. And he just absolutely looks like a menace. And there's so many possibilities and so many ways you can go about uh him in WWE. I like one of my friends, once again, Omar, was talking about how he could easily do, you know, be with American Alpha, which I think would be dope. Like him, Otis, Maxine, Chad Gable, I think would be a really, really, really nice kind of faction. But there's a bunch of different ways that they can go about him. But like Gable Stevenson is a generational talent, and I'm really, really excited to see how they use him moving forward. But these flies. But I want to know how y'all feel seeing Gable Stevenson on NXT Underground, seeing NXT Underground be a thing. Let us know how you feel about it in the comments. We're gonna move right along. And it was announced. Well, we got a couple of announcements. Hold on. Because we have a couple of announcements pertaining to AEW, um, AEW and AAA, right? So first things first, it was announced this past week that AAA Triple Mania 31 Tijuana will be airing on HBO Max, which is now known as just strictly Max. They already have a card for it, and the card features a lot of AEW wrestlers, obviously. For those of you who are unaware, AAA is a famous Mexican based promotion, wrestling promotion. My thoughts and feelings about it, I think that it's great. But I think that it's a part of a larger plan because we saw this past week also um, that AEW has secured another streaming deal. So essentially, this deal kind of puts AEW under the same umbrella as CMLL, and they are actually going to be streaming. I'm just trying to see what. Yes. So it says here that AEW will be streaming on VIX, which is it's a streaming service that's ran by a Mexican American media company called Televisia Univision, and it's going to be starting on Wednesday at 6 p.m. And they also hinted that AEW Collision will be streaming on VIX as well. So you see AAA on Max, you see AEW on VIX, which is a Mexican American streaming service. I think that this is hinting at the fact that AEW is about to start having content on VIX. I mean, not VIX, on Max. My apologies. We've been hearing about it. We've been hearing about the idea of a potential streaming service for AEW for a couple of years now. And with this kind of contract extension and broadcasting rights deal that they've inked when it came to the creation of AEW Saturday Night Collision, I feel like it was only a matter of time before we started seeing some news. But the fact that they have AAA on Max shows I feel like they're trying to test this out to see what the value is of having wrestling on Max. But at the same time, I also think that they know exactly what the value of wrestling is for Warner Brothers Discovery. AEW is arguably one of their most successful intellectual properties that they've had on Warner Brothers Discovery networks over the past 3 to 4 years. So I think that we're going to start seeing more wrestling trickle onto Max, trickle onto HBO properties. And it's about time. I'm really, really happy for AEW. I think this is going to be a great move. And I'm really, really eager and excited to see what kind of comes from it. But yeah, we want to know how you guys feel about AEW potentially coming to Max, AAA, triple. I'm pronouncing my words wrong. Triple Mania, 31 Tijuana, that will be streaming on HBO Max. We want to know your opinions about all of this stuff. Leave them in the comments below. But that concludes our show for today. No, it was a very, very, I know it was a very, very short show. It was a nice little solo pod. Mo will be back, God willing, next week. But once again, thank you guys so much for rocking out with us. And we'll see you next week. Ba, 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 ba.